So Nicole I got you as the Office of Leadership and Learning, and you are definitely going to speak on standards-based grading, which this group is very interested in learning about.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. So Nicole DeWitt, I'm an executive director of leadership and learning. I was previously the principal at Scripps Ranch High School, and Tamara and I worked very closely together to institute lots of different programs and supports for our Scripps Ranch family. So I'm excited to be in this space with all of you. I mainly oversee departments that are associated with student services. So our mental health providers, our counseling and guidance program, as well as our new community schools initiative that we're launching this year, nursing and wellness, our children and youth in transition division. So everything that's kind of associated in addition to academics. But prior to stepping into this role, I did work closely with the leadership team on the revisions to the grading policy. So if at all possible, I don't know if I'm able to share my screen or not, but I do just have a few slides that I can share with you all that just gives kind of a high level overview of the policy itself. So this actual policy was revised as part of the Freedom Summer 2020 resolution that our board passed in support of building anti-racist and restorative communities, specifically to interrupt inequitable grading practices. So the current policy, which is Administrative Regulation 5121, was board approved on October 13th of 2020. So the guiding principles of our standards-based grading policy come from are mainly based on some of the principles that you can find in Grading for Equity. So having clearly defined and distinguished academic marks from citizenship marks, including opportunities for reflection, revision, and reassessment, and then also highlighting the importance of giving specific actionable feedback for students and parents on the progress towards mastery of standards. So those are some of the key elements of the revision of that policy. So when we are looking at implementation, it has been a rollout because it is a shift, particularly for our secondary schools. Our elementary schools have been using standards-based grading for the past decade. And the elementary report card is aligned to the elementary standards. So it was really more of a shift in our middle and high schools. So the first thing we did was make sure that we're removing non-academic factors from the academic grade. So not putting things in like punctuality or attendance, having that not live within inside the academic grade, but actually live within the citizenship grade. And then making sure that students have opportunities for revision and reassessment. So those were the two critical pieces that we implemented in that first year. The second year, 21-22, we wanted to update the academic and citizenship marks in Power School. So those have been updated with their new definitions to align to the grading policy. And then we also updated the comments within Power School to align to language more towards progress towards mastery of standards, make it a little bit clearer on where students are in that process. So the biggest shift is making sure that academic grades are based solely on students' current levels of mastery of the board adopted standards, and that they aren't influenced by behavior or non-academic standards. So that would include things like assessments, group discussions, projects, and presentations. Those would all be factored into the academic grade, but we would remove behavior, work habits, attendance, or late submission of assignments that would not be factored into the academic grade. So those are just some of kind of the key things there. Non-participation in formative assessments, group discussions, individual presentations, or other assignments could negatively impact a student's grade. So that is still factored into the grade itself if there's just non-participation in those academic activities.
A quick question, the late submission. I thought that's interesting because to me, you know, students have a date when there's something is due. And is that saying that if I choose not to turn it in a week later, it doesn't impact my grade?
That is correct.
Huh. Curious why they decided on that one. But
So for the citizenship marks, it says that the citizenship marks shall be influenced by academic marks, or shall not be, my apologies, shall not be influenced by the academic marks and will reflect the student's general behavior, punctuality, effort, and work habits within the school community. So the question that you had, Penny, about where is that late work reflected, it would actually be reflected in the citizenship grade, because that is a reflection of the work habits, not a reflection of their progress towards mastery of standards. So there still is some accountability in that any sort of late assignment would factor into the issuing of the citizenship grade. And at the high school level in particular, citizenship grades are of importance for eligibility purposes when we're talking about athletics and extracurricular activities. So in general, general behavior, participation, effort, as well as work habits, those would all be factored into the citizenship grade. And then the last piece is making sure that the academic grades use multiple means to assess mastery and include opportunities for reflection, revision, and reassessment in order to ensure that mastery of grade level standards for all students. So what we want is for multiple opportunities for students to show mastery. If we only give them one opportunity to show mastery, they may have gained mastery at other parts of the year. And so we want to give them opportunities to show their mastery during those other parts of the year as well. So educators, in collaboration with their departments or grade level teams and their administrators, actually work together to decide on the type and frequency for revisions and reassessments. So it may not be that every assignment is revised, but those critical assignments that are showing mastery towards standards, that's where we would want to have those revisions and reassessments. And then in addition, they would use a similar collaborative process to discuss due dates, when those will be assigned to ensure enough time prior to issuing the final academic mark. So as you were stating, Penny, asking about the late work piece, they have what we would call a grace period to turn in work without penalty. And those grace periods would be defined by the teacher teams themselves within the content areas. So that's just kind of a high level overview of the grading policy itself. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll start, Nicole.
Yep,
It's nice
go
to
ahead,
see you
jump
again.
in.
When this rollout, it sounds like it's a site-by-site basis. So how are you ensuring that standards-based grading is equitable across between sites?
That's a great question, Tamara. So, so it is a work in progress. And what we've done is we've actually created a collaborative work group with our educators and our administrators to talk about the best practices to utilize at standards-based grading, and particularly highlighting some of our school sites that have implemented systems and structures that have worked really well, and then sharing out those best practices to all of our school sites and providing support at the site level through professional learning communities to implement those.
So question, so are all the sites required now to use standard-based grading? Because I know some of my kids' teachers said they weren't going to do it because they just don't understand it. And I guess a question to go with that is, what kind of training have you given the teachers so that they're all on the same page? What I noticed last year was it was very inconsistent.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's some confusion around standards-based grading and using a 4-point system. So those are two different things. So the standards-based grading policy is actually asking all educators to separate the academic grade from the citizenship grade, and it's very clearly defined as to what goes into the academic grade and what goes into the citizenship grade. That is meant to be implemented by every educator across our system. So that is the piece that we were asking for, as well as opportunities for revision and reassessment. Now, how educators define the grades for their grade book That can vary by educator. It varied by educator prior to standards-based grading because educators per California Ed Code are the sole arbiter of the grade. So there are some educators that are choosing to continue with a 100-point scale, but still assessing standards based on mastery levels. There are other educators who have started to shift to the 4-point scale, which is something that many people in a standards-based grading system do use. We did partner with Marzano Research, who's done a lot of research and learning around standards-based grading to offer training to all of our secondary sites over the past 2 years. So we had one cohort of schools that started in that first year of implementation, and then a second cohort of schools that started in the second year of implementation. And so all of the schools did have access to that training. I will say, due to the pandemic, it was challenging for all schools to participate in the training because of other needs that were going on at their school site. So we are following up this year, as I explained, to provide individualized training and support to professional learning communities at the site level to help strengthen their practices.
Okay, so I'm confused now. So I understand the separation between the grade, academic grade, and the other elements. But so now you're saying that the teachers don't have to use the mastery grade if they don't want to?
They are still basing the grade off of mastery of standards. What I'm saying is that they have the choice to use a 100-point scale to show the mastery of standards or the 4-point scale to show mastery of standards, but they still are basing the grade off of the mastery of standards.
Okay, and then is training optional then, or are they required to do the training? Are the teachers required to do the training?
So the training, yeah, the training that was provided by Marzano Research, that was training that was provided to all of our secondary sites, middle and high school. What was challenging is that last year we did have a shortage of substitute teachers during the pandemic. And so it was challenging for folks to always be able to attend some of the professional learning if it was happening during the school day due to that sub shortage. And so we are following up this year to make sure sites have the support that they need if they were not able to attend the training.
Nicole, could you be more specific about exactly what percentage? I mean, when you say sites participate in training, are you saying, is it the usual district thing where one person per department is the assigned person, or is everyone was expected to participate? And if so, what percentage of, you keep saying that they had difficulties, like what percentage of teachers, there are what, 6,000 educators, I'm not sure how many are in classrooms, what percentage of the classroom teachers actually participated?
So that's a great question, Tamara. So the model was having a team of instructional leaders from each school attend the training. And so the training was provided to all of the middle and high schools. Every single middle and high school did have representatives attend so that they could bring the information back to their professional learning communities and share that information that way. But like I said, because of the difficulties during the pandemic, there could have been teams from some sites that were smaller than others.
I'm obviously, I don't have kids in the schools right now, but I guess I'm trying to determine grades are given. Is this apply to all the way down to kindergarten or pre-K, or is it really more middle high school where they get grades? What happens in the elementary?
It applies to all grade levels. It's a transitional kindergarten through grade 12 grading policy. So at the elementary level, they actually do receive numerical grades on a scale of 1 to 4 to show their progress towards mastery of standards. But at the middle and high school level, we do still issue letter grades because letter grades are part of the transcript for college admissions purposes. So we still do translate any numerical scores to letter grades for that purpose.
So I had a question about that though. So the translation of the numerical mastery standards-based mastery scores to the letter grades, that's primarily up to the teacher then how they want to assess that. Is that correct? Or I mean, or is there a guideline where a 4 is always an A, a 3 is always a B? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, so there actually are guidelines for that translation from numerical grades to letter grades. And we are currently working with our Power School partners to figure out an automated way within the Power School system to make that conversion.
Because I mean, I know that I have a 10th grader right now, and he's very frustrated, I think, about the standards-based grading and the way that it's been implemented, particularly last year. It seems a little bit better this year, but even so, there's still, it seems, you know, when you're going on a 4-point scale versus say like a 100-point scale, like a teacher won't want to give a 4 if it's not absolutely perfect by their, you know, by their criteria, right? And so then they bring it down to a 3, and all of a sudden that's, you know, tantamount to a B, when probably it would have been, say, a 93%. You know what I'm saying? And so what we seem to be finding is that the standards-based grading is making it easier for kids to pass a class, but it makes it harder for them to get an A in a class. And so it tends to help the underachievers, but it hurts the overachievers.
So I think one of the things, and I'm glad you brought that forward, one of the things that's a little confusing is that when you look at the grading policy and you look at the letter grades on the grading policy, there is a point value that is given to each of the letter grades, but that's actually for GPA weight. It wouldn't be something that is used by teachers for a conversion purpose. So kind of what you were stating, Janice, there actually is a range for what that conversion could be from a point scale to an A. So for instance, it wouldn't just be just a 4-point would translate to A. There would be a range from like, you know, 3.5 up to 4 that would translate to an A. So those guidelines and those conversion scales have been shared out with educators. We actually have what's called like a one-stop shop for our educators that has all of these guidelines and resources available that they can go to and reference at any time.
Well, and I see that too, but when you're talking about a 4-point scale, right? And, you know, if somebody wanted to be nitpicky and they didn't want to give a perfect score to anything, I mean, like, what are we doing? I mean, they're doing it by 0.5, you know, points at then, and even that is still like, you know, 10% of a, like the whole letter grade, really, when you start thinking about it. And I see the ranges, and it makes no sense, really. I mean, it's just like, so 85 to 100 is considered an A, and, you know, you can even go down to a 50% and still get a C, but it's just still, I mean, it feels like it's not, I know it's not meant to be this way, but it does actually seem less flexible when you're kind of talking about, you know, especially at the higher ends, where you're trying to be like more precise about, you know, what the teacher's expectations are.
So do they actually then get a letter grade for academics and then another grade for citizenship?
Yes.
And then when they're like using those to apply to college, aren't they just going to use the academic? I guess my question is, I'm not sure how the citizenship piece is utilized.
So the academics is what's reported to college. The
Right.
Citizenship piece is used to calculate eligibility for participation in athletics,
Okay.
as well as extracurriculars.
Okay. Okay.
So is this a problem for colleges to figure out, you know?
College, the high school transcript still utilizes letter grades. So
Okay.
when colleges are requesting the high school transcript, it still has letter grades on it. So it is not an issue for colleges.
But a child has more chance to get a higher grade in this system, right? If they can, I mean, my granddaughter, for instance, took a test 3 times. And that makes her grade better.
Well, I think you were saying that the students can, part of the program is allowing them to improve by doing,
Correct.
which
Yeah.
I like. I think that's good.
Correct. So I think it kind of goes back to some of the real world examples we're using, is like when you are out in the workforce and you have a deadline for a project and you turn that project into your supervisor may ask you to make revisions to it, or give you suggestions on how to strengthen that project. And so it's a similar concept where you never know what's happening with a child. I mean, I have an 8th grader right now, and I have a junior in high school, and they're two very different children. And so giving multiple opportunities to demonstrate that mastery, I think, gives a more equitable lens for grading, because you never know what's happening with the child on the day of the exam. They could have something going on social emotionally that's affecting their work habits or their focus. And so giving another opportunity to show that mastery is just kind of helping them demonstrate that they were actually able to attain it at some point in time during the school year.
I just want to go back to training for a second. I know we had a huge sub shortage last year, as you mentioned, and not all the teachers were able to attend some of the trainings. I'm wondering if you're going to do any more training this year, because I know the teachers are still really confused this year, having been to back to school night.
Yes, absolutely. So
yeah.
kind of what I was sharing before is that how we're approaching the training right now is very site specific. So we have a team that works with the professional learning communities at different school sites to provide that support.
And I really like the opportunities for the kids to redo their tasks and redo their assignments and all that to make sure they understand, because I do agree that it's really important for the kids to understand what they're learning. But I don't like the fact that they can turn in things late. I think they should still turn things in on time, because like you said, in the real world and in college, they still have deadlines. Now, being able to redo it with input from the professor or the teacher is great, but I think that it's really doing the kids a disservice by not having a deadline or not sticking to a deadline and giving them, options. And it's hard on the teachers too, because then they don't know, when the kids are going to turn in anything, and, they have to grade something, 2 months after it was supposed to be due. So that's
so
something I would like to
not
reconsider.
necessarily, because there are established timeframes for when work can be turned in without penalty. So I think that's also a misconception that they can wait until the end of the semester and turn everything in on the last day and receive full credit. Teachers actually establish the guidelines for when they will accept late work and what that time frame is, so that they have ample time to grade assignments and it's not all just coming in at once.
Mary Ann has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead and jump in, folks. Yeah.
Thank you. Nicole, just comment on that last part about the not being able to wait until the end of the year and hand everything in. I would really recommend that the school district is very clear in their messaging about that, because it is a misconception. And it's difficult when the district kind of says, well, parents, that's your fault for not understanding. And it's like, okay, well, it's a partnership. So it's also the district's responsibility to be really clear about this. And I think you're hearing from some of the questions that there's a lot of confusion out there, not just on the part of the parents, but also on the part of the educators. And we know this because the GATE District Advisory Committee has a Facebook page of almost 500 people. We have both teachers and parents. And we put up a question about standards-based grading and got a bunch of responses. And it was really very much across the board in terms of some people saying, yes, we know what this is, we're implementing it, it's really good. Other people saying, we're supposed to be implementing this, but we really have no idea what we're doing because we haven't had any training in it. So it seems like there's real inconsistency across the district, even amongst the educators. So I would just really encourage you in messaging to make sure that if there is this one-stop shop guidance thing that you're talking about, that you make it clear that that's the teachers aren't just being left to flounder, because that's what they're telling us as parents. That's what we're hearing from the teachers. So if there is support there, please tell everybody that the support is there. And if the kids can't just leave the work till the end of the year and hand it all in at once, please tell people that, because there's a misconception about that. My main question is that, I'm here representing the GATE students in the district, and there are thousands of them in the middle and high schools who are being impacted by this. And I just want to go back to the very specific phrase about ensuring mastery of grade level standards for all students. So our concern from the GATE point of view is that a lot of GATE students start the year already having met grade level standards. So if the goal is just to, prove mastery of grade level standards, a lot of these gifted students can, especially seminar students, can do that in September. So they've already achieved the goal. And the real concern and the feedback we're getting from parents is that the students know this, and so they're coasting because they know they've got it in the bag. They just have to master the standards. They don't have to push themselves. They don't have to reach and stretch. And so it's a real disincentive for those students who end up feeling frustrated. They feel unchallenged. They're bored in school because they're already at grade level standards. So how is this grade standards-based grading specifically going to be adapted to deal with students who are, or advanced students who are already meeting grade level standards?
So Marianne, I'm going to have to apologize because I'm not part of the curriculum department. And so I don't think that I can speak to an answer to you. I can definitely take that back to our curricular leads on this, who would be Maria Montgomery, and then also Elizabeth Perry, who's helping to oversee like the curricular pieces. So I'm going to apologize that I can't speak directly to that, but I can definitely bring that back to our team.
Yeah, it's a real interesting question. How can we get feedback from you on that? Because I think in my mind, it's a very important question, especially now with some of the controversy over gifted and, those programs and how they're going to continue or not continue. And obviously what of us want to see kids challenged, whether they're, average kids or gifted kids. You want to see them challenged. So what would be the best? Is there another person we should bring in here to speak to that, or what would you suggest?
So as I mentioned, I will bring that back to our instructional innovation team, who oversees curriculum development for all of our content areas. So I actually have a meeting with them, I believe, in like the next week. So I will bring that back to them and make sure that they circle back to Marianne and GATE DAC so that they receive that information. Okay.
And maybe you can let me know if there'd be one of them that might want to come to maybe one of our meetings and speak a little bit to the whole program, because I think all of us are interested in how they're going to move forward with the gifted programs and so on. So
yep, I can touch base with Maria Montgomery on that.
Yeah, and maybe she would be a person to come to our meeting and talk a little bit of that whole issue. That would be great if you can keep in touch with me on that.
Yes, because one of our mantras is that every child deserves a year's worth of growth. And so I know that it's a big challenge. We understand that, the district is huge. It has a very diverse set of students and covers a large geographic area. And it is a challenge to try to come up with policies that are equitable to everybody, but we don't want to make things equitable, and then leave out certain groups of students. So even the high achieving students also deserve to make a year's worth of growth.
Oh, absolutely. Very interesting.
So Marianne, do the gifted students take advanced courses, even community college courses, and then they've mastered that too?
It depends on what school they go to. That's an it depends answer.
Yeah, some of the schools I think do bring in people from the community colleges, perhaps, to provide classes for them. Yeah,
that does happen in some cases, yes.
So if the youngsters do, Nicole, are in a gifted or advanced class, then are the standards quote higher? Or again,
So I think that's what Marianne was asking. And like I
Yeah,
said, like my
yeah.
apologies. I'm
Okay,
just not
we'll
part
get
of
that
the
more.
curriculum team that
Okay,
develops the
gotcha.
scope and sequence. So I don't want to share information that may not be
No, that's
accurate.
fine. But obviously we all have an interest in that. Okay. Serena, you had a question I think you put in the chat. Did you want to?
Oh, I was just wondering how the transition to college, yeah, and then I'm sorry, Karen, you have your hand up too. I just was quickly transition to college for students that in the standards-based grading system, the allowance to have work turned in at a different rate than is allowed in college. Like college, my understanding is there's a deadline and you turn it in. So what's San Diego Unified doing to help prepare students for that difference between high school and college? I'm not saying I'm for or against the difference, just what's the preparation going on for, especially for junior and senior age students that are going to transition to college if they
right. So we actually have a middle college program that lives on the Mesa College campus called the San Diego Met, and they've been using a standards-based grading system for quite some time, and work closely with the college professors on those pieces. And so I think a big piece of it is also teaching students to advocate. And so if they're having an issue with an assignment that may delay them turning that in with their college professors, they're working with their college professors to resolve that. So that's kind of the piece that's also being instituted, is making sure that you're self-advocating and you have that strong communication with your professors when there's adjustments that may need to be made.
Oh, is that available to all students?
So students who are interested in our middle college programs, they can apply to be part of the middle college program. We actually have 2 different campuses. We have East Village Middle College, which is on the City College campus, and then the San Diego Met, which is on the Mesa College campus.
Okay, and just for a broader, let's say they apply to UCSD, let's say they apply to UCLA, let's say they apply to Michigan. I appreciate the conversation and communication between teachers, but at the San Diego Unified, the responsibility to instruct students that there may be a difference in the grading of their work at the high school level and then the grading at the college level, where even if you communicated to your teacher, they may not accept late work. So that's the training. I'm wondering if it's happening. I think those sound like wonderful programs, but I just wonder if the communication, are you asking other colleges?
So again, I just want to say we're not trying to communicate through the standards-based grading policy that you should always turn your work in late. So I just want to make that clear. Like there's still deadlines and we're still trying to teach students work habits so they can be successful post-college as well. But we also know that there's sometimes circumstances that may prevent a student from turning something in. And that's when that conversation does need to take place between the student and the educator to figure out like what a solution may be. So I do just want to bring that forward, and that it's not, we're not advocating for there to always be late work turned in. There still are deadlines, there still are expectations, but also recognizing that there's still circumstances sometimes that hinder students from turning those things in on time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. I mean, there are circumstances in there that hinder late work. I was just wondering about the broader training piece. Thanks.
But I just want to jump in here. That's not what's being communicated. It's basically the rule is that you can turn in late work. The exception, I'm just giving you perception, right? And what is being understood. The perception is that the rule is you can turn the late work in late. So maybe there needs to be better training, communications, messaging around that piece, because right now it's kind of like, yeah, everyone can turn in their work late. It's okay. So I think the reality and what you guys are trying to do is very different.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether when you say there are circumstances, there's a big difference between having a policy for late work versus this is the deadline. If you have trouble meeting this deadline, come meet with me. Is there any time where a student is, the dog ate your homework is not going to qualify as a late, these are the types of parameters that we accept late work for, or is it just sort of a blanket you can do things late policy, which is how it's being perceived, going to with what Lily said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to apologize. I have construction going on in my home right now and have to excuse myself in just a minute to deal with my contractors. So my apologies on that. But to go back to your question, Tamara, again, as I was citing before, in California Ed Code, it does state that the teacher is the sole arbiter of the grade. So they would set those parameters. So they would set the parameters of, what their grace period may be, what the circumstances would be for accepting late work and what that looks like. So that is something that has been communicated out to educators. I 100% am hearing that more educators need support in defining that for their teams and for their schools. And so that's what our instructional innovation team is working on through the professional learning community model.
Karen, I want you to you've had your hand up for a long time. Do you have a quick comment or question?
Oh, I'm just trying to understand how homework fits into standard-based learning assignments, I think is what we've been calling them. Because my understanding is that students, while they're required to submit homework and assignments, it seems like for most of my daughter's grades that I just sense that there's an overemphasis on test and test taking. And if you're not a stellar test taker, and it seems like, the old model of being rewarded if you are a slow and steady turtle who does good work and does good assignments, that's been stripped away and put over into the work habits. But it seems it would discourage really trying to be excellent in your day-to-day assignments. I just wondered if you could, and I've heard the term summative and formative, which maybe is part of it.
So there are summative assessments, which would be more like what you're indicating, like a traditional like end of unit test assessment, right? And then there could also be formative assessments that are happening on a daily or a weekly basis to check for mastery of standards. So all of those would be factored into the academic grade. As far as homework or class assignments, it really depends on if it's a formative or a summative assessment. But if it's simply for practice, it probably would be a smaller percentage of the grade than those formative and summative assessments that you were referencing.
I know you said you have to leave shortly. And anything else that somebody quickly wants to ask, comment regarding this?
I'm wondering, is this a countrywide? Is California leading out on this? Because my daughter has hopes and expectations to apply to colleges out of state, and I'm afraid that when she gets stacked up against students from other states who are in this old model, that she won't look as good to college application processes.
So this is actually a policy, or the standards-based grading is something that is in other states as well. We've seen it in particularly on the East Coast, areas like Maryland, Baltimore. They were kind of leading the way in this, areas like Kentucky, et cetera. So there's other states that have implemented policies like this one throughout the United States. It's not just relegated just to California. I do believe coming out of the pandemic, there has been more of an emphasis on looking at equitable grading practices because of what students were facing during the time. So you may see more districts and schools that are headed in a similar direction.
Nicole, can you just give sort of a percent? Do we have a percentage of districts within California that have switched to standards-based?
I don't.
I got that feeling it was still a minority position, but I'm just.
I actually don't know off the top of my head, Tamara. I'm sorry. I'd have to look a little bit more.
Does LAUSD do it, or just San Diego?
I know that LAUSD did make some changes to their policy during the pandemic. I don't know if that's continuing on now in the regular academic year. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was very nice meeting all of you. I will definitely, Marianne, follow up with those individuals that I mentioned earlier. And then Penny, I will also see if there's someone that would like to come talk about the GATE curriculum piece and the standards for our GATE students.
Yeah, I think that's of great interest. We really appreciate your spending the time and kind of clarifying and answering some questions. Obviously, people still have some concerns and questions. Hopefully you got a little bit of input to help you go back and say, here's some concerns that some of the base parents who are active have. So I will look forward to your sending me maybe a contact for that and being in touch with any other information. Thank you so much. Have a
Yep,
good
absolutely.
day,
Have a
everyone.
good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice to see you, Tamara. We need to get together soon.
Okay.